Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The hospital corridor was silent, lit only by the cold glow of fluorescent lights. The clock on the wall displayed 3:07 a.m. Everything seemed normal to Emily Carter, a night nurse in the emergency department for 5 years, used to lonely patients and the incessant calls of the night. But that evening, a shiver ran down her spine as soon as she heard the phone ring. With an automatic gesture, she picked up the phone. "Emily, help me," the voice on the other end was weak, trembling, almost foreign. Emily shuddered, there was something terribly desperate in that whisper. Who is calling?" she asked, but the voice barely answered before trailing off. The silence that followed was heavy, oppressive, almost palpable. The receiver still vibrated in her hand as if holding the shadow of the caller's fear. Emily quickly jotted down the time and number, an instinct she developed after years of sleepless nights and strange incidents. She considered warning Richard Blackwood, the hospital director, but the idea of waiting until morning seemed too risky. Yet, exhausted, she decided to do a few rounds before dealing with it. The night wore on, each of Emily's steps echoing on the cold tiles. The doors to the rooms were closed, the patients fast asleep. But in the director's office, something seemed different. A feeling of anticipation, of silent threat. When she finally returned to her desk to call Richard, her heart skipped a beat. His office was empty, no secretary, no director. Nothing. The phone on his desk was flashing with a new message, "Trust no one," written by hand, on a piece of paper Emily had never seen before, as if someone had placed it there just before disappearing. Emily's blood ran cold. The call in the night was not an isolated incident. It was the beginning of a dangerous mystery, a mystery that would affect not only the hospital, but her own life, in ways she could never have imagined. She took a deep breath, clutching the sheet of paper in her trembling hand. Richard Blackwood had disappeared, and nobody knew why. The sun hadn't yet risen when Emily Carter crossed the threshold of the hospital, still reeling from the night's call. Her colleagues were few and far between at this hour, and the coffee maker hummed in the staff room as the only sound of life. But Emily had no appetite for coffee. Her mind was preoccupied with Richard Blackwood's disappearance and that enigmatic message, "Trust no one." She started by checking the security cameras. The footage showed Richard leaving his office at 2:45 a.m., as usual, without any sign of panic. But from 3:05 a.m. onward, nothing. No trace of him in the hallways, no exit through the emergency exits. As if he had vanished into thin air. Emily sensed a presence behind her. She turned around sharply. It was Marcus Hill, the head of the night nurses, a tall and serious man, who immediately noticed his tense look. "Emily, are you all right?" he asked, frowning. I don't know," she replied, her voice trembling. "Richard, he's disappeared. And this message, trust no one." "What?" said Marcus, his tone shifting from surprise to concern. "Are you sure about what you're saying?" Emily held up the sheet of paper, trembling. Marcus took it, his eyes scanning the words as if each letter carried a danger. "Okay," he finally murmured. "We need to inform the police, but discreetly. And above all, don't let anyone else know." Emily nodded. Her instincts screamed that something deeper was going on. It wasn't just a disappearance, it was a warning. And if Richard had disappeared because of what he knew, then someone within the hospital itself might be involved. As they began to take stock of the previous night's comings and goings, a shiver ran through Emily. Someone was watching them. She could swear to it. And in that moment, she knew this mystery had just become far more dangerous than a simple kidnapping. Emily could no longer stay at the office. The idea that Richard Blackwood had disappeared without a trace haunted her. She decided to walk the hospital corridors, searching for any detail that might explain his disappearance. The fluorescent lights cast eerie shadows on the white walls, giving each corridor a sinister feel. Emily's every step echoed in the silence, but she wasn't alone. She could still feel that presence, like an invisible gaze upon her. She headed towards Richard's office, hoping to find something useful. On the desk, she noticed scattered files. One of them was marked, Project Phoenix, with hastily scribbled notes. Emily quickly scanned the pages and her eyes widened. The project appeared to involve confidential searches of sensitive medical records, some concerning influential patients and business executives. A sudden sound of footsteps made her jump. She turned sharply to see Samantha Reed, Richard's personal assistant, who appeared panicked but was trying to appear calm. "Emily, do you know something?" Samantha asked in a low voice. "I don't know yet. I just found this. Look." "Oh." Samantha murmured, seeing the notes. I shouldn't talk about this, but Richard told me he was afraid someone in the hospital wanted to sabotage the project." Emily felt a shockwave ripple through her body. Someone inside the hospital might be involved in Richard's disappearance. And that strange message, "Trust no one," suddenly took on a terrifying meaning. Suddenly, a discreet alarm sounded from the administrative floor. Emily and Samantha exchanged a worried glance. Someone was searching the offices, and it wasn't authorized personnel. "We must be careful," Emily whispered. "But we must discover the truth before it's too late." As they slipped away discreetly, Emily vowed to herself that she would find Richard, no matter the danger. The mystery had just deepened, and the hospital, once a place of care and safety, had become a trap where every step could bring them closer, or put them in danger. Emily spent the morning analyzing security camera footage with Marcus Hill. Every corner of the hospital was meticulously examined, but Richard's disappearance remained inexplicable. However, one detail caught their attention. At 3:12 a.m., a hooded figure had been seen entering Richard's office. The person wasn't wearing a badge and seemed to know exactly where to go. "Who would have access to the office at this hour?" asked Emily, her voice trembling. "No one, apart from authorized personnel," replied Marcus, frowning. But it clearly wasn't Richard. Determined to investigate this mysterious figure, Emily and Samantha returned to the office, this time cautiously. Emily noticed that some drawers had been opened, some files moved. But the most troubling thing was a small black leather notebook she had never seen before. When she opened it, bizarre notes and codes filled the pages. Some referred to Phoenix, the confidential project she had discovered the day before. Others mentioned the names of staff members, some innocent, others influential in the hospital. "It looks like a list," Samantha whispered. "A list of targets or accomplices, perhaps." Emily felt her heart race. Every word seemed to confirm that Richard's disappearance wasn't an accident. Someone inside the hospital was manipulating events for mysterious reasons. As they examined the notebook, a metallic clang was heard behind the door. They froze. A male figure appeared, hesitant, but with a menacing air. It was Ethan Cross, one of the hospital's security officers, known for his brusque temper. "What are you doing here?" Ethan grumbled. We're checking something in the principal's office," replied Emily, trying to remain calm. "I don't believe you. If you're intelligent, you'll leave this office and forget what you saw." Emily immediately understood that Ethan knew more than he was letting on. But she also sensed that he might hold a key to discovering what had happened to Richard. As he walked away, Emily whispered to Samantha, "We need to keep an eye on him. If someone inside is manipulating all this, it's him or someone very close to him." And for the first time, Emily realized that every person in the hospital could be a suspect. The game had only just begun. Emily couldn't afford to wait for the answers to come on their own. She and Samantha decided to discreetly search certain areas of the hospital, starting with areas rarely frequented at night, the archives, the basements, and the old abandoned wings. In the basement, between rows of dusty files and locked cabinets, Emily spotted a small, almost invisible compartment in the wall. Curious, she pressed a hidden latch and discovered an old metal box. Inside was a set of documents and a USB drive marked, Phoenix, Confidential. Samantha carefully took the USB key. "Emily, if anyone finds out we have this," she said in a low voice, "we're done for." Emily nodded, but the adrenaline was driving her on. They quickly returned to the office to examine the USB drive on a secure computer. The files contained cryptic emails, lists of names, and most importantly, a map of the hospital showing certain locked rooms and rarely used corridors. One detail immediately caught Emily's attention: a small, isolated room in the basement, marked "Restricted Access," with a handwritten note on the plan: "Contains key information, limited access." "Perhaps this is where Richard is being held, or where someone is hiding what he wanted to protect," Emily whispered. But before they could plan anything, a noise rang out from behind the door, quick footsteps and whispers. They froze, breathless. Emily recognized the figure. It was Ethan Cross, the head of security. "What are you doing here?" he growled again, this time accompanied by another unknown agent. Emily felt her heart race. They now had a choice: flee with the USB key and risk losing access to the crucial information, or stay and confront the truth. "We need to know where he is," Emily said, determined. "Even if it puts us in danger." Ethan looked at them suspiciously, but instead of attacking them, he stepped back and whispered, "Be careful, some truths should never be discovered." As he disappeared into the shadows, Emily realized that the mystery surrounding Richard Blackwood was far more dangerous than she had imagined. And that she had just stumbled upon something that could change her life, and the lives of the entire hospital. Emily spent the morning studying the hospital plan found on the USB drive. Every corridor, every door, every emergency exit was analyzed in detail. The marked room, "Restricted Access," it seemed almost impossible to reach without triggering an alarm. Yet Emily knew she had to go there, alone or accompanied by Samantha, to find out what Richard Blackwood had been trying to protect. "If we go there," said Emily, "we'll have to be quick and quiet." "And careful," added Samantha, her voice trembling. "Everyone in this hospital could be watching us." As night fell, they slipped quietly into the basement. The corridors were empty, but every sound, every echo of their footsteps seemed to reverberate throughout the building. Emily felt a growing tension. The slightest suspicious movement could betray their presence. They finally reached the "Restricted Access" room. The door was reinforced, but to their surprise, it wasn't locked. Emily pushed slowly, holding her breath. Inside, a small, dimly lit room awaited them, filled with files, computers, and electronic equipment. On the central desk, an open notebook bore the name of Richard Blackwood and detailed notes on the Project Phoenix. But that wasn't all. In the corner, a small metal locker was ajar, and Emily immediately recognized a familiar figure: Richard himself. He was sitting, bound, but alive. His gaze lifted to them with a mixture of relief and fear. "Emily. Samantha," he murmured. "You don't know how much danger you're in." "Richard," exclaimed Emily, approaching. "Who did this? And why?" Richard shook his head, unable to answer immediately. His eyes slid towards the door as if he feared they were being followed. "The Phoenix Project," he finally whispered. "Some members of the hospital board, they're involved. And Ethan, he's not who you think he is." A sudden noise behind them startled everyone. Someone was approaching. Emily realized time was running out. They had to get Richard out of there now, before the truth, or the danger, caught up with them. As they prepared to leave the room, Emily felt for the first time that the mystery was becoming tangible. Richard Blackwood was there, alive, but their investigation had only just begun, and what they were about to discover would shake the entire hospital to its core. Emily helped Richard to his feet, her heart pounding in her chest. Her hands trembled, but her determination was palpable. They had to leave the "Restricted Access" room before anyone discovered their presence. Samantha gently closed the door behind them and scanned the deserted corridor. "We have to go through the basements," Emily whispered. "The elevators are monitored, and so are the main exits." They advanced cautiously through the darkness, following the directions on the map found on the USB drive. Each footstep echoed strangely in the silence, every sound seemed amplified tenfold. Emily felt her survival instincts awaken. Someone was following them. Suddenly, a metallic sound rang out behind them. Emily turned around and saw Ethan Cross, his icy gaze fixed on them. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low but threatening. Richard turned around sharply. "Ethan. I thought you were a security man, not a traitor." Ethan gave a cold smile. "Loyalty has a price, Richard. And some information must never be revealed." Emily realized they had no chance of getting through the main corridor. She grabbed Samantha and Richard by the arm and rushed toward a service staircase marked on the map. The sound of Ethan's footsteps was getting closer, but Emily didn't slow down. Every second counted. They finally reached an old door leading outside, hidden behind containers of medical supplies. Emily opened it with difficulty, and a breath of fresh air greeted them. But the tension didn't leave them. They knew Ethan could surprise them at any moment. "We need to go somewhere he can't find us," said Emily. "Do you know a safe place?" Richard nodded his head, still weak, but determined. "There's an old warehouse outside the complex, used for confidential archives. Nobody thinks to go there. We can hide there and analyze what I've protected." As they walked away into the night, Emily felt for the first time the adrenaline and fear mixed with a strange excitement. The mystery of Richard's disappearance was only just beginning, but now they were together, and every step they took brought them closer to the truth, or to even greater danger. Emily, Richard, and Samantha finally reached the isolated warehouse, located a few minutes' walk from the hospital. The building looked as if it had been abandoned for years, its crumbling walls and dusty windows barely reflected the moonlight. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The heavy silence concealed something dangerous. "Nobody should know we're coming here," Richard murmured, glancing nervously around him. They entered the warehouse and locked the door behind them. The interior was filled with old files, metal cabinets, and dusty cardboard boxes. Emily took the USB drive and laptop out of her bag, ready to analyze the files and understand what Richard had been trying to protect. But they had barely begun when Samantha noticed a disturbing detail. "Emily, look at the footprints on the ground. We're not the first to come here." Emily knelt down to examine the footprints, fresh despite the dust. Someone had preceded them and perhaps searched the area. A dull fear rose within her. Someone knew they would come here. Suddenly, a locking sound echoed behind them. Emily turned around and saw that the front door had been closed from the outside. "We are not alone," Richard murmured, his eyes wide. They then heard a slight creaking sound coming from the back of the warehouse. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was an unknown woman, tall, elegant, but with a cold and calculating gaze. "I was expecting you," she said calmly. "Who are you?" asked Emily, her voice trembling but firm. "Let's call me Madame Gray, and I am here to reclaim what belongs to me." Emily felt her heart clench. The mystery had just deepened. Not only had Richard disappeared, but powerful and unknown forces seemed determined to keep certain secrets hidden, at all costs. "We will give you nothing," said Emily, determined to protect Richard and what he had discovered. "Very well," replied Mrs. Gray with an icy smile. "But remember, in this game, there are no losers, only survivors." Emily then understood that their struggle had only just begun. And that the truth they were seeking might be more dangerous than they had imagined. Emily, Richard, and Samantha remained frozen in front of Mrs. Gray. The air in the warehouse seemed heavy, almost suffocating. Every breath seemed to echo in the silence, every glance felt like an accusation. Why do you want this?" asked Emily, trying to hide her fear. "Because this project must never see the light of day," replied Mrs. Gray calmly. "Some truths are too dangerous to be revealed, even to those who believe they are acting for the greater good." Richard stepped forward, still weak but determined. "You don't understand. Project Phoenix isn't just a medical file or a secret plan. It's the key to protecting lives, to exposing the corruption that's eating away at this hospital. If this information falls into the wrong hands, everyone will be in danger." Madame Gray gave a faint, icy smile. "That's exactly why I need to retrieve those files." "And you're playing with fire." Emily felt the tension rising. Every second counted, and the room seemed to shrink around them. She knew that if Mrs. Gray took the USB drive, all their discoveries and Richard's safety would be compromised. Samantha whispers to Emily. "We need to find a way out of here, or neutralize Ms. Gray." Emily nodded, aware that there was no going back. She quickly examined the warehouse and noticed a small passage at the back, half hidden by boxes. "This way," she whispered. Without wasting any time, they rushed towards the passage. Mrs. Gray pursued them, but Emily managed to grab a hanging cable and throw it in front of her, knocking down some boxes and slowing her progress. They finally reached a hidden fire exit, leading to a dark alley outside. Breathless but alive, they understood that the battle for Project Phoenix was only just beginning. "We must protect these files at all costs," said Richard. "And find out who is behind all this, before it's too late." Emily looked at the USB drive in her hand. The danger was real, the threat imminent. But for the first time since Richard's disappearance, she felt they had hope. A fragile hope, but enough to continue their fight against invisible and powerful enemies. Emily, Richard, and Samantha had taken refuge in a safe apartment, away from the prying eyes and cameras of the hospital. The USB drive lay on the table, like a small treasure chest of truth, waiting to be opened. The atmosphere was tense, every outside noise seemed to herald imminent danger. Richard took a deep breath and opened the files on the laptop. The data was encrypted, but Emily, with her instinct and patience, managed to decipher the first few lines. What they discovered exceeded all their expectations. Project Phoenix wasn't just a plan to protect influential patients. It exposed a secret network of corruption within the hospital, embezzlement, falsification of medical records, and even illegal experiments on some patients, concealed beneath official reports. The names of the board of directors and several key members of security were mentioned. Ethan Cross, the head of security, was clearly involved, but he was just a pawn in a much larger game. "My God," breathed Samantha, unable to look away from the screen. "It's worse than I thought," said Richard. "Everyone's involved, and some people would kill to keep this from ever getting out." Emily felt a cold anger rising within her. After weeks of mysteries and disappearances, the truth was finally out, but the danger was greater than ever. "We have to make all of this public," she said, determined. "But we have to do it intelligently. If we get caught, they'll destroy us." Richard nodded. "And we need to understand why Ms. Gray and the others want this information at all costs. There's something they're hiding, something personal." As they continued decrypting the files, one detail caught Emily's attention, a folder marked, "Experiences with Staff." The names corresponded to certain hospital employees, several of whom were still working there. Emily immediately understood that Project Phoenix was not just a bribery scheme, but an attempt to control and manipulate those who had access to sensitive information. "This goes further than we imagined," Emily murmured. "It's a hospital-wide conspiracy, and we're at the center of it all." Their fight to uncover the truth was far from over. But for the first time, they had a map of the network, a chance to outwit their enemies, and above all, a clear objective: to save Richard and put an end to Project Phoenix. Emily, Richard, and Samantha knew the decisive moment had arrived. The Phoenix Project files revealed everything: corruption, manipulation, and illegal experiments. But to put an end to this scheme, they had to confront those responsible, including Ms. Gray and Ethan Cross. They devised a meticulous plan. Using the digital evidence and Richard's notebook, they intended to lure Mrs. Gray into a trap. Emily discreetly contacted a trusted journalist, ready to publish all the information as soon as the confrontation took place. The meeting took place in the warehouse where it had all begun, this time transformed into neutral ground, secured and monitored remotely by the journalist. Mrs. Gray arrived, calm and confident, with Ethan at her side. "You really thought you could beat me to it?" said Mrs. Gray, her icy gaze sweeping the room. "Not only will we expose your crimes, but you will no longer be able to manipulate this hospital," Emily replied firmly. Richard took out the notebook and the USB key, and showed them to the two opponents. "Every action, every secret is recorded here," he continued. "The police, the medical authorities, and the public will know everything. And this time, there will be no room for your manipulations. Ethan tried to intervene, but the live video feed and the journalist's presence neutralized any action. Ms. Gray, realizing their plan was failing, stepped back, furious but powerless. "You think you've won?" she murmured, but Emily sensed that she already knew she had lost. A few minutes later, the police arrived, alerted by the journalist. Ethan and Madame Gray were arrested, their networks dismantled thanks to the accumulated evidence. The names of their accomplices were revealed, the illegal experiments stopped, and Project Phoenix exposed. Richard, freed and safe and sound, looked at Emily with gratitude. "Without you, I don't know what would have happened." "We all risked our lives," Emily replied with a slight smile. "But now, everything is finally clear." Samantha, standing beside him, added. "And this hospital can finally become a place of care again, not a breeding ground for corruption." As the sun rose, illuminating the horizon, Emily felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders. The longest night of their lives was over, and the truth, however dangerous, had finally triumphed. The Phoenix Project was no longer a secret. And Emily knew that, sometimes, the only way to survive was to confront the darkness, to let the light in.